So today's EcoTalk will be Laura Kearns. She is a wildlife biologist with the Division of Wildlife. She has been working with the division for over 10 years, focusing mostly on non-game species of birds. Laura has worked with our parks before, especially I think about 2 years ago. She helped us install some Modus towers at both Carriage Hill and Englewood Metro Parks. Those towers put out a signal, so if any birds have tags on them that have that radio tags, they can be, as they fly over those towers, they can be detected. And Laura helped us at the parks install those, and she does a variety of other conservation efforts as well. So let's welcome Laura for her EcoTalk.
To work with bald eagles with the Ohio Division of Wildlife, and that has mostly meant that I do surveys for bald eagles from an airplane or a helicopter. I haven't really done much with them in the hand. I don't think I've touched a bald eagle the whole time I've been in this position, but I've gotten to do a lot of cool surveys, and it's been really cool to watch the population trajectory change over time with these birds. So yeah, today I am going to just kind of review some of the life history of bald eagles. Then I'm going to talk about the population recovery for the species with a focus here in Ohio. I'm going to touch probably relatively briefly on some updates to the federal regulations and permitting for bald eagles, and then end with just things that we're still kind of keeping an eye on in terms of potential threats and concerns with the population. So, bald eagles are our national symbol, or a national symbol, but our national bird. So that has kind of given them, we have charismatic megafauna, but this is charismatic megafauna maybe on steroids a little bit. But yeah, people love eagles. They love to watch them. I love to watch them. And they're just, I actually saw one. I was just out for a walk with a friend in Columbus last night, and I was walking by the river, and there was one perched in a tree, and that was just really cool to see one in a pretty urban area. So they've definitely been expanding. This photo here shows an adult. Let's see if I can get these things. There we go. And it's not really showing up on the screen. That is so interesting. Anyway, you have an adult bald eagle there at the top, and then you have I don't know, maybe a second or third year bird down there in the lower corner. So there's a plumage difference as eagles. It takes them 5 years to get that mature plumage. They are the second largest raptor in North America.
What's the largest?
What's the largest? Anybody want to guess what the largest
California
is?
condor?
Yes, got it. Very good. But they have these plumage differences that lead up to that adult plumage. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see that change over time. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, this is driving me nuts and I can't. But the juvenile often gets mistaken for a golden eagle. So I'm going to just touch from an eye, even though my talk is not about golden eagles, I do like to touch upon the difference between bald and golden eagles, because people oftentimes, especially get that juvenile bald eagle confused with the golden eagle. So if you're lucky enough to have one in hand, being able to look at the legs of the eagle can help identify. Bald eagles do not have what we call feathered tarsi. So their legs are more bare down here. But if it's a golden eagle, they'll have feathers kind of covering more of that area. However, most of the time, that can be really hard to see when you're out in the field looking, unless you got a really good spotting scope or binoculars. So here's some other tips for what to look for. So more likely you're going to see them flying around, and so looking at the white patterns can be helpful to identify them. So so the top row are the bald eagles, kind of going from the juvenile pattern to the more adult pattern. And so looking at those patterns of white on the underside can be very distinctive. So notice that along the underside of the wing here, you kind of have these white stripes on the bald eagle. But when you're looking at the golden eagle, this is the juvenile, which actually has quite a bit of white in it. There's more of like a sort of a crescent shape on the underside there, and then that fades out with time. To the adult, doesn't really have much. Oh, thank you so much. Doesn't have a lot of white there. Also, the undertail coverts here are white in the juvenile, and then that fades out with time. So you can get a look at the underside if you're not sure. The other thing about bald and golden eagles is that golden eagles are really only here in the winter. They don't breed here in the state. And they're still relatively rare in the winter. So again, think about what time of year it is as to whether or not it might be a bald or golden.
So we have golden eagles here in Ohio?
Yeah, in the winter, but they're still pretty uncommon. Yeah, and there's certain places where they tend to be seen more often than others, like the wilds over in eastern Ohio. That tends to be a spot where people see them more often in the winter. There's been reports the last couple years around the Kilbuck Marsh area up near Worcester, that area there. So their eastern North American population is more in the eastern U.S., and in the winter they kind of use the Appalachian. They come down, migrating down the Appalachian mountain chain, and then so we don't get them as often. But again, eastern Ohio is, you're more likely to see them over there than over here. But they do pop up in various areas from time to time.
Did you say they don't breed here?
No, they do not. Why not? They're primarily a cliff nesting
You're
dwelling.
talking about the bald eagle.
No, the golden eagle.
Gold, thank you. Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we
got lots of bald eagles, as I'm about to tell you about. Yes. Yeah. So, all right. Okay, so a little bit taxonomy, conversation about their distribution. So, yeah, we were just talking about the distribution of the bald. I was talking about golden eagle, but the bald eagle is fairly well distributed these days around North America. The only place they're still relatively, they're still concerned about them is in the Southwest. But most, and I don't know, again, the mountains, the Appalachians, not so much, but doing pretty well across the continent. They are, so the purple here, this is from eBird. How many of you have heard of eBird? Yeah, eBird is a initiative through Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology. It's a way to report your birding observations, and it's just become a really tremendous tool for tracking wildlife or bird populations. But anyway, so this data is generated through eBird. But the purple areas indicate areas where you tend to see eagles year-round. The red are areas where you usually just see them during the breeding season, and then the blue are areas where you see them during the wintering or non-breeding season. So you get migration from these northern populations down into the south during the winter. The other thing, taxonomy, order Accipitriformes. So this includes the other hawks and eagles, family, Accipitridae as well. I'm going to talk a little more about the scientific name, Haliaeetus leucocephalus, here in a few slides, but just touching on that there. Okay, so the bald eagle diet. Fish, they like fish, but they they also like other things. And so they actually eat, they're scavengers as well, but they also, they're more of a generalist. Like they'll eat waterfowl, they'll eat other birds, they'll eat mammals, and then they'll scavenge on just about anything. And then in Alaska and other places, this is a photograph from Alaska many years ago, but quite common at some of the dumps. So yeah, so they can be versatile in their food and their foraging. So because of their affinity for fish though, most of the time they're associated with water. So they like to be near the Great Lakes. They like to be near wetlands. They like to be near big reservoirs that we've created. They like to be near rivers. So oftentimes you tend to see them around water. They also like trees. Trees are great places for them to perch and roost. They like to build their nests in trees. So a lot of times you're gonna have water and trees and hopefully eagles as well. So their nests are quite large. And so you need a pretty substantial tree to hold that nest up. So these two examples here are, one's a sycamore tree on the left, another one is a cottonwood. So those are some of the species that hold a lot of the eagle nests here in Ohio. Some of the big pine trees have been trees that the eagles have chosen to nest in. So yeah, it's not so much species though as it is the size of the tree. So the bald eagles generally are nesting here in Ohio from early February through June/July. Courtship kind of begins in December in some places. You'll see pairs starting to build nests or refresh their old nests or courting with one another. But their eggs, they usually don't lay their eggs until early to mid-February. And then it takes about 35 days for the young to hatch. So once they hatch, they are then hungry. When they hatch, they're typically like a paler color, but over time that becomes a darker gray color. And so again, the smaller, paler young, and then this was taken from one of our aerial surveys, but there are at least 2, maybe 3 chicks in this nest. It's a little hard to tell with the shade on the tree there, but there's a head here and at least another head or body right here, but they're kind of like these gray masses in the nest at this point. And then finally, right before they fledge, they're kind of like just this large brown bird. And it takes 10 to 12 weeks for them to fledge from the nest. What else? Okay, so I'm not going to ask you questions or quiz you. That would be fun, maybe I should, but. So the meaning of Haliaeetus leucocephalus, the hali and the ethos are Latin for sea eagle. So they're very closely related to other sea eagles. Bald eagle is the only sea eagle here, and primarily in North America, but some others that you'll find in Europe and Asia are the stellar sea eagle. I think there was a famous one that was hanging out in Maine a couple years ago. And it shouldn't have been in Maine, but it was, got lost. And then the white-tailed eagle was over in Asia. And the leucocephalus means white head. And then the bald, it's not saying that the eagle's bald. That actually came from a Middle English term that meant shiny white. So that's why we call them the bald eagle. Another thing people don't realize, I said they're scavengers, but they're also kleptoparasites. Does anybody know what that means?
Say it louder.
They're thieves.
Yeah, so they steal food from other eagles, other birds. So this is why, I don't know, maybe some of you may have heard Benjamin Franklin. He expressed concern when the government decided to make the bald eagle our national symbol, because the character was not necessarily the best. So anyway, but we did. So our national bird is a scavenger. It's so cool, right? So anyway, so yeah, just a summary of just some of the life history then. They prefer fish, but they're also generalist, a scavenger. It can be a short distance migrant or resident. Here in Ohio, the nesting season generally early February to July, and then they prefer nesting in trees. I didn't really talk about artificial nesting sites, but compared to the osprey, which is another raptor that has done really well, recovered really well here in Ohio and across the country, they do not tend to use those poles and platforms as readily. So like the osprey, you see a nest in the top of a cell phone tower, most of the time it's going to be an osprey nest, because osprey actually preferentially like to nest on these artificial structures. Occasionally a bald eagle will, or maybe they'll take over an osprey nest, but most of the time it's going to be an osprey in those cell towers.
That's what they have in the Tennessee River.
So, okay, so now this is like the best part, right? The population recovery of bald eagles. So they're part of the group of raptors. Raptors are birds of prey, birds that have talons, sharp beaks. A paper came out about 5 years ago. So we call it in the bird world the 3 billion birds paper. Unfortunately, the downside of this paper was that they documented a loss of 3 billion birds since the 1970s. But on the flip side, they were able to document that we had gained 15 million raptors. So that's what's kind of the incredible part, that things like bald eagles, osprey, peregrine falcons, all of those populations have recovered amazingly over the last 40 to 50 years. So yeah, we'll just kind of talk about how did this happen. I'll start with once upon a time in Ohio in the late 1970s. There were very few eagles here in the state. We have data with the divisional outlet going back to roughly 1959, 1960, and we only had about a dozen pairs nesting in the state. And it just kept going down. So by the late 70s, we only had 4 nesting pairs in the state. So what was going on during that time? Well, hopefully a lot of you here remember about the whole controversy with DDT. So this was an insecticide that was used in agriculture, but also for pest control, for keeping bed bugs at bay and other kinds of pests like that. Unfortunately, the insects would eat this, maybe they wouldn't die, or maybe something would eat the insects that died, and that animal would ingest the chemical, and then the next step in the food chain would eat that critter, and so on and so forth until you've got biomagnification in the food chain, so that the top predators were eating these organisms that were had a high concentration of this chemical. And in the eagles, it led to eggshell thinning and embryo disruption. And so this was a problem. So they couldn't produce any young. And so over time, that led to, as the older individuals died, there wasn't any reproduction to replenish the population. So it affected a host of raptor species, the ones I just mentioned, eagles, osprey, peregrine falcons. It also affected a lot of waterbirds like brown pelicans, white pelicans. So DDT was introduced in 1947, but fortunately through books like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, kind of people figured out this was a problem. And so the federal government banned use of DDT in the US in 1972. So about the same time, that's when the state and federal Endangered Species Acts came about. So the eagle was federally listed in 1978. The state actually got the jump on it a little bit and listed them in 1974. And along with having those protections then under those acts, the state took, and many other states took the same methods. It wasn't just our state, but all the other states working on it as well. But one approach was just monitoring, documenting where all the nests were and monitoring them. There was a program to foster eaglets from captivity. So if there were any eagles in zoos or other facilities, if they had eaglets, they would place those in nests out in the wild. If a landowner had an eagle nest on their property, if it was an important foraging area or provided important habitat for roosting, they would work with the landowners to do whatever they had to do to protect that nest. And then rehabilitation, wildlife rehabilitators really helped with, if eagles were injured or sick, they would help get them healthy again if they could. So, with all of those efforts, it was a little bit rough at the beginning. So in the early 1980s, things were still kind of straggling along here. But then in the 1990s, things started to pick up. And so by the mid-2000s, wow, we had gone from only a few nests in the state to around 200 nests. Pretty incredible. And so it's funny how the federal government delisted them a little bit later than us, but they delisted them before we got around to delisting them here in the state. So they were federally delisted in 2007. And then we waited a few more years just to try, I don't know, I wasn't around the division when we made that decision, so I don't know what all went into that decision, but we delisted them in 2012. Populations had been doing pretty good. So that was kind of a huge milestone in their recovery. So what we've been doing since that time, like I said, most of what I do is I get to survey the eagles from the plane or the helicopter. And so we've done this aerial nest survey. So up until that time, they had been tracking all of the eagle nests in the state, and it was a huge volunteer effort. I know Bill was involved with that effort. Anybody else here helped to volunteer and watch eagle nests at that time? No, okay, that's all right. Yeah, it was a huge effort. 200 some nests with volunteers helping to monitor. It was a big effort, and because they were doing well, it was kind of like decided that, look, there's other things that need help. We need to move our resources on to something else. So we want to keep monitoring the eagle, but let's do it with a sampling survey. So since 2012, the procedure has been to monitor 5 10 square mile blocks across the state. We do 2 of those blocks every year. Every year we go back to the same blocks and count all the nests we can find, and then we go back in May and get the productivity, get the number of chicks in the nest, and that gives us a measure of productivity and nest success as well. And then 3 blocks we do every 3 years, so we have 3 set blocks, so we're hitting them every 3 years. And so that goes into a total, and then we can calculate an estimate of the eagle nests from that. So if you hear in the news that we had so many eagle nests this year, most likely it was an estimate from the government. Sometimes people miss that, or the media misses that important detail. So it is not an exact number, even though it sounds like an exact number, it's an estimate, and sometimes people leave that out, so just wanna clarify that. Another survey we do is an annual midwinter count, and this is something that a lot of the states are doing across the country. It's in conjunction with at least here in Ohio, we do it in conjunction with our annual midwinter waterfowl survey. So we have somebody in our plane counting ducks, and the other person is counting eagles. So we do that every year as well. So, so I talked about the sample, and I'll get to the numbers from that here in a second, but we decided in 2020 to do another full-blown census across the state. And so we relied on help from citizen scientists for that, so people reported eagle nest locations. And then our pilot and other folks in the aircraft helped to verify those nests. And from that, we were able to locate over 700 eagle nests in the state. Again, it just blew us away, it was amazing. And this was a distribution of the nests across the state. So the ones up here in northern Ohio, the top county was Ottawa County with 90 nests that year. That whole area there. That's like, I don't know, has anybody been up in that area before? If not, you should really go up there. I mean, spring is kind of like from March to May is kind of the best time you can see the eagle nests more easily because the leaves are on the trees. You can see the eagles more easily, but there's pretty high concentrations. I think somebody was just saying Wisconsin, you see eagles all the time in Wisconsin. You're probably going to see similar levels of eagles up there in northern Ohio. Alaska, somebody talks about all the eagles they see in Alaska. Go up to northern Ohio, you're going to see a lot of eagles. But some other hot spots are Trumbull County, Ashtabula County. So we have some wetlands up in that area. Trumbull County, there's a Grand River Wildlife Area, Mosquito Lake, and Mosquito Creek Wildlife Area. Those are also pretty good area for eagles. And then Central Ohio's not too bad either. Knox County, Wyandotte County, Marion County. We have the Killdeer Plains Wildlife Area, Big Island Wildlife Area. It has some good eagle populations up there as well because they like the wetlands. Montgomery County, let me talk about Montgomery for a second. So on that census, we had 3 eagle nests in the county. And I checked today before I came just to see if we had any updates there, because we're not actively going out and monitoring or censusing the nests, but people report stuff to us. And so I was looking, and there's at least like 3 or 4 additional potential nests. So I'm sure there's more than that now, and Bill probably maybe knows the most recent, but anyway, I think there's probably more than that here now. So, and the other cool thing from that census was basically there's an eagle nest in every county in Ohio. There were 3 counties at the time that we weren't able to find a nest, but since that time we've had a nest confirmed in Jackson County, one in Lawrence County, and I think the only one I haven't been able to definitively confirm anything is Meigs County, but there is one in the river on an island that's just over the border. So close enough. So technically, there's eagles in every county in the state now. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, here's my favorite graph in the world is just seeing the eagle nests. To see that huge jump. Again, these gold ones right here, the gold or yellow dots represent an estimate. So we're estimating that from our annual survey. 2020, we did the census, and it was like, whoa, we've been underestimating everything. And we've continued with the same survey to estimate the numbers. And we've continued to see increases in those survey blocks. There's some where we see increases or generally stable numbers or increases. So again, we'll probably, it's an estimate. So but it gives us a general idea of the trajectory of the population. So again, generally this has been really good news. Things keep going up and up and up. Only thing was this past year, for the first time since I've been doing the survey, we had a slight decline in the number of estimated nests. So I'll talk about why I think that might have happened later in the talk. But generally speaking, we still the numbers, if you look at the numbers of bald eagle nests, we're still over 800 nests in the state, which is just absolutely incredible. So let's see here. Yeah, also just share a little bit of information. About 5 years ago, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did a bald eagle population estimate. They have other areas that they sampled throughout the U.S. and they also incorporated some eBird data into this estimate as well. What's really cool is, so over 316,000 bald eagles in the lower 48 were within the Mississippi Flyway, almost 160,000 eagles from that survey. So really some incredible numbers. Okay, so that's the good news on the population status for the eagle. So now I'm just gonna talk about some of our, about regulations a little bit. And this can be a little bit dry, but I just wanted to touch base on it because some things happened in this past year that I think are just worth noting. So just review the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act real quick. It's been in place since the late 1930s, so even before the Endangered Species Act. It provided some special protection for bald eagles, and it still does to this day. So they're not protected under the Endangered Species Act anymore, but they're still protected under this act. And under that act, it's illegal to take a bald eagle. And take, there's a definition of what that means, but it means like you can't kill or possess or harm. It also includes this term disturb. And they also have a definition for disturbance. Disturb is to agitate or bother a bald eagle to a degree that causes or is likely to cause, based on the best scientific information available, number one, injury to an eagle. Number two, a decrease in its productivity, or nest abandonment. So, you're not supposed to disturb the bald eagle. So, under this, now during the time when they were protected under the Endangered Species Act, it was a lot more strict about keeping your distance from a nest. And I know a lot of people still think that it's illegal to be within 330 feet, 100 meters of an eagle nest. That is now a guideline. You're not gonna get in trouble for being closer than that, unless you cause enough disturbance as defined in the previous slide. So this continues to be the primary guideline, that you keep that distance from the eagle nest. And that's about the length of a football field. However, what's happening, again, we have so many eagles on the landscape now, they are moving into areas that we never thought they would move into, urban areas. Oftentimes we have these situations where an eagle nest pops up in somebody's backyard, next to a bike trail, where they're less than that distance away from where people are using the bike trail. Up at McGee Marsh, which is a popular birding area, of a boardwalk, gets very busy in May. And we have eagles nesting right over top the boardwalk. People can't maintain that distance away. So anyway, this has kind of become a, there's a lot of gray area here. And so to accommodate kind of the change in the eagle population status and change in the behavior of the eagles, they're just so much more tolerant than we thought they were before. There have been some recent changes to the regulations. Like nothing has changed about, like it's still illegal to disturb an eagle or hurt an eagle, but there's a lot more kind of, I don't know, flexibility, I think, with permitting. People can get permits to do things in and around an eagle nest. I mean, and again, there are certain distances that apply depending on the type of activity. But they made some big changes recently with wind energy permitting, power line and power pole permitting for energy companies, eagle nest disturbance, and eagle nest take. And so just making people aware of this, just because we do get a lot of people concerned, and just to let you know that just things have changed a little bit. But they're doing this so that for like wind energy and power lines, they're actually doing it to increase compliance. They're under the new system, there's kind of more flexibility in it. So these companies are, like the permits, getting these permits are not mandatory. So with this, they can get these permits, and it kind of helps the Fish and Wildlife Service keep a closer watch on what's going on. So it's a good thing. The thing I'm going to just touch on briefly are the nest disturbance permits, because it's probably the thing that you would, as the public, might encounter the most often. And so there's kind of two different permits. There's nest take and there's nest disturbance. So occasionally there is a reason that somebody needs to take an eagle nest down. So for example, if they nest on a cell tower, because that disrupting the communication, that can cause a problem for human health and safety, like emergency services need to use the cell tower function. Normally, if they do need to take a nest, an eagle nest, they'll do it, they'll wait until the nesting season is over and then take it down. But just making you aware of these things. So anyway, there's some nitty gritty. It does cost money to get an eagle permit, so it depends on the type of permit, how much it costs, but it does cost money. There's these general nest disturbance permits that are for a year. So generally somebody gets a permit for a year. You can renew them if they need to. In some of these situations, again, if you're observing these things, these are some of the things that are included in that. So construction, we get a lot of calls about construction near eagle nests. Linear utilities, so pipelines, other things. Shoreline alteration, timber management. We get a lot of calls about maybe somebody's in there cutting trees around an eagle nest. Motorized recreation, so cars driving by, non-motorized recreational activities, like I just talked about the bike trail, for an example. Aircraft. Eagles are actually a concern around airports. Unfortunately, some eagles have gotten killed by airplanes, but some eagles can also cause airplanes to crash, and that's not good for people. So we're trying to find, yeah, right. Of course, it's not good for people, but we're trying to find a line so we can balance the needs of both the eagles and the people. But drones are definitely one of those things. We do not want people flying drones around the eagle nests. They're very disruptive, and the eagles get very upset. So this does not include drones. Nobody should get permission to use drones around eagle nests. Blasting loud noises like fireworks. We get a lot of calls about, we're gonna have our 4th of July fireworks, and there's an eagle nest right next to the park where we're gonna have them. So these are a lot of just situations that have cropped up in recent years where eagle nests are now, and so this kind of helps provide some flexibility for people to keep doing what they're gonna do. 9 times out of 10, they're probably not gonna affect the eagles, or the eagles we know that they're tolerant from years of observing how they respond to these activities. So many of these permits kind of give us all some flexibility, but it gives the Fish and Wildlife Service an opportunity to kind of keep an eye on things as well. So again, this is all at the federal level. I'm a state employee, so I'm just kind of like the messenger for all of this stuff and have to relay this information and pass people along to Fish and Wildlife if they have questions and that kind of thing. But if you are, as a public entity, see some kind of disturbance, you can always contact one of our wildlife officers for your county or our district wildlife staff, and even me. I get the calls too, and we can help figure out, like, is someone doing something? Do they have a permit for it? If not, let's figure out a solution so that we can have compatibility with our activities. All right, so I'll wrap up just talking about just some ongoing concerns. Again, eagle populations are doing really well, but there's still some threats out there which we're keeping an eye on. We're trying to make sure that they don't cause the death by 1,000 cuts scenario. We actually do, we have what's called a migratory bird salvage permit for the Division of Wildlife. And so that means, like, if we handle any kind of injured or dead migratory bird, we have a permit to do that. So, like, if you find a bird and you're not sure what to do with it, 9 times that, or one option you have is to call one of our wildlife officers or staff, and they'll come pick it up for you. And if it's like an injured bird, they can take it to a rehabilitator for you, things like that. So anyway, we handle a lot of birds, and sometimes we're just picking up dead birds, but we have to report that to the Fish and Wildlife Service. So I get the fun job of tracking that. Another part of my duties I don't really talk about a lot, but I actually was curious to see what was the cause of death or injury to eagles. And so we've finally got a good enough system that I can kind of track this stuff, so that's really nice. But so anyway, here's a table just from last year. We picked up 82 eagles total here. And just out of curiosity, 25 of those were still alive. Most of them were dead. So 25 were alive, 30%, 57 were dead, 70%. Just so you know, all of our dead eagles, we ship to the National Eagle Repository in Colorado. And those carcasses and their feathers are redistributed to Native American people because they use them for ceremonial purposes. So that's one reason we have so many dead eagles, is that we go ahead and most of the time, unless they're in really bad condition, we collect them and send them out to the repository. So this is maybe somewhat of a biased sample. It's not any kind of scientifically sound sample, but it just gives you a sense of what's going on out there. But of those, vehicles were the top cause of death or injury, 27%. There's a lot of things that we didn't know why it was dead or injured. So again, another 24%. Unknown trauma. So this is where we know there's some kind of injury. The bird has a broken wing, or obviously has hit something, or something's hit it, or maybe had a fight with another eagle. We've had that happen sometimes. But anyway, some kind of trauma. We don't really know why. Power lines are unfortunately another issue, 15%. Other types of traumas, so those are, we knew where the trauma was, but it's like, this one hit a building or a window, or this one got hit by a train. Maybe that hit some other vehicles, but I think of a train, an eagle being hit by a train is something different from roadkill, or and then just kind of other random things. But that's kind of the distribution of things that cause death and injury to eagles. Again, that number 82 may seem kind of alarming, but if you think about going back to our graph, 800 nests in the States, you multiply that by 2, at least 1,600 adults. And then you've got all the birds between the age of 1 and 5 that aren't reproducing yet. And we well have over 2,000 birds in the state, if not 3,000. So this is a relatively small percentage of the total population, but still, these are things that if we can do something about them, let's try to do that. The other thing, the unknown or the other can include disease, and I'll touch on disease here at the end. So, so here's my black vulture, because I don't have any other good pictures of carcass. But again, eagles are scavengers, just like vultures, and you have something that gets killed on the road. Hey, it's a free meal. I'm gonna go down there and eat it. And unfortunately, especially some of the younger eagles, they just haven't quite figured out that there's gonna be these cars on the road, and so we have a lot of birds that get hit by cars. Power lines, so they can be electrocuted or can just run into the line. So a lot of times we see this in areas with higher densities of eagles, like Ashtabula County. For some reason, we've had a lot of issues up there with power line collisions or electrocutions. But there are a lot of solutions out there, things they can do to, at least with power poles, to prevent hazards. So there's some solutions out there. It's just working with the power companies. And I think I mentioned there with the permits, there's a power line permit as well. I think that's the goal of that permit, is to try and get more proactive structures out there. And then with collisions, there's things they can put on the wires to make the lines more visible to the eagles and prevent them running into the lines. So yeah, there's some solutions out there. Again, it's just working together to get these solutions in place. The thing I'm going to end with are the diseases, and this is the thing that for me has probably been the most disturbing, because I've actually seen the impact. So one thing is West Nile virus. So that's a disease that was introduced in around 2000, and it affected a lot of birds at that time. There were a lot of bird deaths, especially among raptors. And it's still a problem, it's still out there, it still causes sickness and death. And it's a human health hazard as well. It's mosquito-borne, so people can get West Nile virus. In terms of eagles, there was a outbreak in Utah in 2013, killed 45 more eagles, and it was linked to eating infected grebes. Grebes are a kind of waterbird. And so because they're scavengers, sometimes they're a little more susceptible to some of these diseases because they're eating things that are already infected. The other thing, a more recent thing, is highly pathogenic avian flu. Waterfowl reservoir, that's why I have a picture of the duck there. But in 2022, there was a new strain that came into the migratory population from Eurasia. And we actually had confirmed several cases of bald eagles that died because we had them sent for testing, and it was confirmed as avian flu. And we had over 40 bald eagles die that year. That we didn't test everything, but it was highly suspicious that it was avian flu. So that was, and that was all at once. That was like in like a month. And that's like some rehabilitators were saying, hey, we don't get that many eagles in a year, let alone a month. And so I'm gonna show you some graphs now. Now we get to the really nerdy science part. I'll show you some graphs. But saw some impacts on the 2022 and 2023 nest success and productivity, which are likely because of avian flu. I don't have concrete evidence, but likely. So this graph here is showing the average bald eagle nest success over time. So this is the last 10 years from 2014 to 23. Sorry, the print is probably a little small for some of you in the back. Nest success from 0 to 100. So in the last 10 years, most of the time, our nest success is pretty good. it is 80% or higher. And that's one of the reasons we've been seeing these kind of continued upward trajectory in the population. In 2022, the average nest success was around 48%. And I threw that survey and I was like, whoa, this is bad. I did not feel good that day. And we saw things like a dead adult eagle on the nest. And this was shortly after we confirmed our first avian flu case in like March of that year. So I had flown the first round of our survey in March, just counting the eagle nests. And then we came back in May and we were doing the nest success. And that was after we had all this mortality of eagles. And wow, it was like, whoa, this has really had an impact on our populations. So that was the lowest it had been in many years. I can't remember now when was the last time we had nest success that low, but it had been a while. But fortunately, 2023, we came back and did the survey again, and we saw, things inching back up. We had like 72% nest success that year, so that was really encouraging. So yeah, that up there. In terms of nest productivity, we're talking about nest productivity. It's how many young are produced, and generally, so here, same years, number of chicks per nest. We got 1 chick to 3 just 3 chicks. That's the normal size of the clutch. So again, generally speaking, we're pretty close to 2 chicks per nest over the last 10 years. But then 2022, it actually wasn't that bad in 2022, a little bit lower. Boom, 2023, for whatever reason, it was only like 1 chick per nest. So I don't really know what was going on. Like it seemed a little bit weird that avian flu would still be impacting nest productivity, except maybe it was something like, well, there were so many adults killed, seasoned adults. A lot of times those adults who are breeding for the first time aren't quite as successful at producing young. Maybe there were more of those on the landscape that year and they just weren't quite as good. I don't really know, but it was still kind of interesting to see that lowered nest productivity. So anyway, I think I pointed out this little dip in our nest numbers in 24. That was like 7.5%. So not a huge dip. And again, it's just 1 year. And a lot of times 1 year changes aren't too concerning. It's when you see those changes over a longer period of time where it becomes concerning. But still very curious that we saw a little bit of a downturn in eagle nests this past year. Again, I don't really know why. Hopefully that trend doesn't persist. But we had a lot of other stuff going on this year too. We had tornadoes that could have knocked some of the nests out. Again, we still may be seeing, like, because so many adults were lost in 22, that we're just having a little bit of a lag in the breeding population kind of gaining the experience it needs to keep producing at the levels we saw before. So I don't know. With tracking a population like this, I'm always kind of excited to see what happens the next year and see where we're going to go this year and what potentially what might be going on and that sort of thing. I'm actually submitted some data to a researcher who has seen some other impacts in Michigan. He does work in Michigan, but has seen like impacts on the eagle population up there, most likely due to avian influenza. And so we're working with some other partners from other states, pulling our data together and seeing if there's certain trends that we should be wary of. So I think the avian flu has been kind of one of the scariest things we've seen for eagles and for lots of other migratory birds as well, because it affected a lot of different species. And obviously, I don't know if you listen to the news much, but it's been found in cows now. I mean, it was concerned for the poultry industry, but now it's in cows, and there's always a concern it can transfer to humans. So, and I mean, it has, but not in a super deadly way. But anyway, these are things that we're trying to keep an eye on, and be interesting to see how it evolves. So again, avian flu response, bad news. It seems to have had an impact on the eagle population, but not in a huge way thus far. You know, we have enough numbers on the landscape. We have a healthy population, so population is demonstrating some resilience. You know, I was really happy to see the higher nest success, higher nest productivity numbers this year. They went back up again. I don't have that data in this presentation, but they went back up. So yeah, I feel encouraged by that. Last but not least, I'll just touch on lead poisoning. Haven't necessarily been able to document this widely based on that data I was looking at before, but lead can be an issue. So oftentimes lead ammunition is still used in hunting. So if you have carcasses that you know, somebody hunts a deer gets shot, but it gets away and isn't able to be retrieved, that the lead shot or fragments are in that carcass, and a scavenging eagle can ingest that. The bird can get sick and die. Lead concentrations are too high. So lead is a concern. And there was a study that came out a couple years ago. This was in the northeastern US, but they found that lead ingestion had a 4 to 6% impact on reducing eagle population growth. So it wasn't a huge, you know, again, we're still seeing growth in the population, but their studies suggested that it had reduced that population growth. So there's a lot of campaigns out there to switch from lead to non-toxic shot. So again, there's no, a lot of people are trying to encourage hunters to switch from one to another. And it's not just eagles that it impacts, swans, some of your other species that scavenge or that can ingest it by you know, accidentally ingest it and that sort of thing. So let's see, I think I'm almost done here if you can wait just a second. So anyway, we're continuing eagle management in Ohio. Again, we're still monitoring to a certain extent. Rehabilitation is still widely done throughout the state. We still have laws protecting eagles. And then just trying to continue to educate people on how to behave around eagles, you know, try to give the nests the space they need. Don't fly drones around eagle nests, things like that. So you can always help. We have a wildlife reporting website, and I'm sorry I do not have like an easy click link thing, but if you just Google Ohio Wildlife Reporting website, you'll, most of the time you get there. That's how I find it when I need to find it in the office. And we have a place where you can report bald eagle nests, so if you know of one that you don't think has been reported, seems like it's new, go ahead and report it there. So yeah, so thanks for listening, and to all the people who have made the eagle recovery what it is. I mean, I'm just a messenger, really. Lots of people did a lot to make the eagle come back. So yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And here's my email if you think of something after the talk and you want to question me. Yeah.
I read an article or saw a presentation on older eagles.
Okay.
And they get so old, and said some of them they have a choice whether they want to keep living or not. I guess they break their beaks off, they grow new beaks, and then they pick their claws out, grow new claws. Is there any truth to that, or is that just?
Wow,
Yeah.
I've never come across that myself.
I was
So
on the internet, I don't know. It doesn't mean anything, that's why I'm asking.
yeah, I don't know. That's not something I'm familiar with.
What's their lifespan?
Oh, it can vary. Yeah, in the wild, 20 to 30 years, but in captivity, 50 or more.
This article said they could live to be 75 if they did that, regenerated those parts.
Honestly, I think that's unlikely that they do that. but yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested.
It's only him that had
Send me
the
the
truth.
link. Send me the link, and I'll look into it for you. Yeah.
Two questions. First question on the lead, how much do they have to consume? Just a few pellets or quite a bit? I mean, for that to affect it?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I don't think they run a test, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I just didn't know, I mean, if they had to get a few pellets or they had to really get a few pellets, you know?
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not
Next
sure
question.
concentration.
Can you, or do they catch a mating pair and transport them to another area? Will they stay in that area or will they migrate back?
Ooh.
The reason I'm asking is, I've been up in Alaska and they got so many eagles up there you can't, move from them. If you could capture a mating pair, transport them to an area that's not and turn them loose, could they, or would they go back? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it may depend on different things like time of year, where are they at in their nesting cycle, things like that.
Yeah, it wouldn't have to be after the nesting cycle or before they start nesting. But
yeah, okay.
to me, it would seem if you could capture a nesting pair, which I think, and then move them somewhere, well, if they wouldn't go back, I would say you could really plunge them much faster.
Yeah, so I know that, I can't think of any specific eagle studies off the top of my head, but I know that sometimes, so I talked about airports and how those can be places where they're trying to keep birds out so that they're not running into airplanes. And I do know there are some, sometimes we get red-tailed hawks that, it's a USDA Wildlife Service agency that kind of helps deal with things like wildlife at airports. And they do put like a little tag on the bird. So sometimes we've gotten calls about someone finding a bird with this tag on it. And I talk with them and it's like, this bird was originally caught at such and such airport and now it was over here, or they released it over here. And I think in their work they found that it kind of depends on the distance away. Like there's, and again, I just don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but there can be certain distances away that you get to this certain threshold and they're less likely to
But they do go nest and sometimes clip the young ones so they have the history of them, right? They'll tag their legs so if they die, well, he was born in this nest, so and so here.
Right, yeah.
I was just thinking, with all the pairs, if you could take one and move it down to the
Yeah.
border where you got problems getting them, and they're not going to go back 1,000 miles.
Yeah, so again, if it's like a young or a juvenile, they're, like the juvenile birds will disperse from their natal territory. So a young bird would be, like if you needed to translocate eagles, what we call it, generally be better to do that with a young bird that hasn't set up its territory yet. But when you do have a territorial pair, I think birds have a very good sense of direction and they are more capable than you think of returning to a natal area. But the young birds, they're not as tied to a specific area. So like in terms of we did all the folks working on the conservation of the eagle, they would take chicks from different areas and put them in nests. When we did the osprey reintroduction, they were translocating osprey from the East Coast here to Ohio, and they stayed. It kind of, the age of the bird I think has a huge impact on what that distance could be. But yeah, that is a way, moving the birds. If they're problem birds somewhere, you can take them and move them somewhere else, and that has been a technique that has worked in some situations.
I was thinking more to repopulate an area.
Right, exactly, and that's what we did with the osprey.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I missed it at the beginning, but have you found plastic nurdles to be a concern? Or not?
Yeah, plastics, right? Yeah, so I didn't really talk about like plastics and other contaminants. Yeah, that's not an area of active research that I do. I haven't heard as much about plastics in eagles per se, but I would think it could be a problem just because of aquatic environments and fish ingesting them and the eagles ingesting the fish. So yeah, I'm just not up on that research at the moment. PFAS are another concern, contaminants. But yeah, there's like, you know, mercury is still a concern. I mean, all of those, there's lots of contaminants out there that can still be an issue. We haven't. DDT, you would think from the DDT story that we might have learned our lesson, but there's still a lot of stuff out there that has potential to be a hazard. And we just don't, we gotta keep doing research to understand what those impacts are. So, yeah.
Do they mate for life? Or do they?
Yeah, generally they do. If you know, if one of the individual dies, then they pretty quickly can get replaced. But there can be fights, there are divorces. I mean, I've worked with a lot of different bird studies. I've some of my more detailed behavioral work was actually with songbirds, but even in songbirds, we found divorces sometimes where, I don't know, for whatever reason, they switch partners. So that can happen. I don't know, Bill, if you in your years monitoring nests, if you ever noticed anything like that, and it might be it was such a small area that you were focused on, might have been hard.
I didn't see it, but I know it repeats. So it happens, but not as frequent probably as it happens in other species.
Yeah.
Other species mess around a lot more. Eagles have pretty good fidelity as a pair, and especially to your question, they have high fidelity nest size. So once they're established, I mean, you can hardly dissuade them from their home territory.
Yeah.
So they're.
Thanks.
Can I ask you a question on the ospreys? You said you were involved in moving the ospreys from the coast to here. The reason I asked, there's 2 nests, osprey nests on Route 4. And you're going out to, out of Dayton. And they're recent. They weren't there a few years ago. They're down there now. Is that part of that relocation thing?
Yeah, so so I use the royal we in terms of the Division of Wildlife. I wasn't working for them when we were actually doing the reintroduction of osprey in Ohio, but I know something about the story. So yeah, that active reintroduction took place from like the late 90s to about 2003. So since that time, we have not been translocating osprey from the east. So all of the osprey nests you see now, I mean, we weren't even, we were hacking out young. We weren't doing anything. We put up platforms, but the birds themselves decided to build the nests. Any new osprey nest, any new bald eagle nest you see now, they've done it on their own. So again, this just, you seeing these new nests is just, again, a sign of the recovery of these.
They had one on a light fixture.
Okay.
An off-ramp. And the next year, someone put a platform up there for them.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So,
okay.
And that's in the last 5 years.
Okay, yeah, so, that's sometimes, so I talked about power lines and power poles, sometimes, and this was a light pole you said?
Yes.
But there still can be concerns about electrocution happening around like a light pole, so probably whoever was managing that light pole decided to put up a platform to try to discourage them from using that light pole.
On the line it says a power pole.
It's not, there's not a light on it.
Oh, okay, it is a power pole?
Yeah, it's
okay.
not a power pole.
Yeah, so that's probably what happened there, is they put up that platform.
Just a little flat thing.
Yeah.
So the nest gets really big and then it gets kind of blown away, then it comes back again.
Yeah. So the osprey nests are a little less resilient, and they tend to have to rebuild them a little more often. Yeah, the eagle nests tend to be a little bit heftier and more robust. I mean, they come in every year and kind of fix them up, but they do tend to last a little longer than the osprey.
We have a few of our younger conservation leaders in the room,
Okay.
and then we also have a few high school teachers.
Okay.
And I was just curious if you can share a little bit of your career path, what led you to your career, and
Sure.
kind of how you got to where you are now.
Sure, yeah. So when I was younger in like junior high and high school, I just really liked animals a lot. I liked the outdoors too. So I majored in biology when I was in college, but I wasn't specifically focused on birds at that point. I was just interested in nature, ecology. Ecology was the thing I was really interested in, that relationship between plants and animals, or animals and their habitat. So I did an undergrad degree in just general biology, and I didn't really know a lot about the wildlife career at that point. But after college, I was doing some internships, and I did an internship at Glen Helen Outdoor Education Center. I was a naturalist, and during that time, as part of our duties, we had to take care of one of the raptors at the Raptor Center. And I got the bald eagle to take care of. His name was Solo. I don't know, Solo is maybe infamous around this part of the country maybe, but I got to take care of Solo, and he was such a cool bird. And after that, I was kind of hooked on birds. And so I just kept doing some internships. I worked at the International Crane Foundation in Wisconsin. I learned aviculture. I learned aviculture is the care of birds. We did whooping crane and conservation of cranes around the world. I got to wear a crane costume, pretend to be a crane mama. And, but then what I really wanted to do was go back to those ecology roots and do field biology and study birds in the field. So I did an internship the next summer studying songbirds and nesting songbirds in a clear cut and a bog habitat. And it was really cool, really enjoyed it. I got to do some mist netting, handle songbirds. I learned about bird calls, so I could do surveys, followed birds around trying to find nests, and then like study the nest success. So it was just a really, really neat internship. So then I went to grad school, and that's when I kind of got really into the research side of things. And it's a long story, but I did some other research, but it was all like trying to understand birds and their behavior or their ecology, or monitor their populations. And then I finally found myself back and did a master's at the University of Michigan, studying black-throated blue warblers in Michigan. Went to Florida for a job, Virginia for a job, then landed at Ohio State for a Ph.D. And then after my PhD, I found this job with Division of Wildlife. So it's a very circuitous path, and it doesn't have to be that way, but it's also okay if it is. Definitely if you're interested in this career, happy to talk to you in more depth. I encourage you to talk to other professionals in fields that you're interested in. I encourage you to volunteer at your age, to get out there and volunteer. You can have a lot of cool experiences volunteering. Just be curious and ask questions, but do what you love too, So.
Never quit learning.
Never quit learning.
There you go.